Well, thank you, Teresa, for that kind introduction. And because I know it's going to be on everybody's mind until I get it out of the way, go to economywrap.com. When the stock market crashed in 2008, I realized people were panicking and I needed to help reduce the panic, so I did what any financial advisor would do. I wrote a rap music video about it. So, because I am so very street dog. Yeah. Well, I wish I could say that the next few months will be filled with as much levity for all of you. I know that's not necessarily the case, and that we don't know what the future of anybody among you in this room is going to be. Teresa asked me if I would speak for a few minutes on how to be prepared for that particular rainy day if you happen to be somebody who gets laid off. What we're going to do is spend about the first 20 minutes or so with me sharing with you what I think are some of the more important ideas that will apply to, I think, most of you in this room. And we're going to have the rest of the hour for your questions. So most of the agenda today is going to be set by you. If there's the possibility that you're going to be losing income in your household, then there's one particular focus for you as you get ready for that day. So what it's all about, that first blank on your handout, it's all about cash flow. It's not about return on investment. It's not about a bargain that will never come again. It's all about cash flow, how much money is coming in and how much is going out. If there's going to be less coming in, then you need to be able to figure out whether you'll still have enough to go out the door at the same rate that it's been going out, or whether you'll have to make some changes. So for many of us, structuring debt is going to be a very important step. We, in Northeast Ohio, have a tendency to want to have our mortgages paid off. We want to make sure that the bank can't get the house. The irony is that if you tried to get your mortgage paid off by using a shorter term, a 15-year mortgage, for instance, instead of a 30, you're at greater risk when your income drops that the bank will end up with the house. One of the things that many of you should be giving serious thought to is refinancing your mortgage into a new 30-year fixed, not a 15. Yes, the interest rate is higher, but it's not about the interest rate. It's all about cash flow. And if the bank is happy with you paying $575 a month, that's better than if the bank is insisting that you pay $940 a month. So would you pay less on a mortgage if you had a 15-year fixed rather than a 30? Yes, you'd actually save some money. The interest rate would be lower. You'd pay it for fewer years. In the end, it would be fewer dollars out of your pocket. We need to make sure that you can get there right now. Right now, the issue isn't what's it like in the end 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. For you, it may be, boy, what's it like on May 2nd and for the next 6 months after that, or who knows how long after that. And having a lower mortgage payment means the bank is happier with less of your money every month. That's a good thing. If your mortgage balance is relatively low, you may find that not many banks are interested in refinancing, but ask them. Don't assume that it's out of the realm of possibility for you. You probably should roll the closing costs into the principal of the loan, because chewing away at your savings, and who, by the way, who has more savings than they know what to do with? Can I see hands? Okay, I didn't think so. So if you don't have more savings than you have plans for, burning some of that up to reduce the monthly payment is probably not the best strategy for you right now. So plan on rolling closing costs into the loan and refinancing into a new 30-year fixed. And ask the bank, before you begin this process, how much would the new payment be? If you're saving $10 a month, maybe it's not worth doing. If you're saving several $100s a month, partly because the interest rate may be lower, partly because you're stretching it out to a new 30 years, go for it. If you don't sustain a layoff or another loss in your cash flow, you can always keep paying off the mortgage at the same rate you're paying it today and have it paid off at the same time or about the same time. Stretching it out to a new 30 gives you more flexibility, and flexibility in cash flow is what you want right now. Other debt you may want to consider paying down. If you've been paying something on a 12-month same as cash deal, for example, and if you miss a payment, that cost is going to go up to more than 20%. You might want to see if you can make sure that's wrapped up before May. That might be the best use of your money to make sure that that debt doesn't get much more costly. Some of you are paying off your credit cards every month. That's great. Others of you are not. That's very common to carry credit card debt. Take a look at those credit cards and see whether it makes sense to transfer some balances from some of your high rate cards to a lower rate card. Ideally, I'd like to see all of you have not more than one credit card, because if you have more than one, would the balance split up among 2 or 3 or 4? I've seen more than a dozen in my practice from one family. It's very easy to deceive yourself about how much you owe and how much that really costs. When it's all on one bill that comes every month, you see that balance and you think, man, I owe $4,000. I thought I owed $800. Or maybe I shouldn't buy another widescreen TV right now. So make sure that you take a look at the credit cards. Don't just assume that everything is the way you want it, or that they're all paying the same, charging you the same amount. You want to make sure that you're paying as little as possible. If you're interested in strategies for getting cards paid off and which card you should pay off first, we'll have time to discuss that in the question and answer session. If you have bills you can't pay, don't make your creditors, don't make the billers wonder what's going on with you. If there are bills that you cannot pay, contact them. Try to work out a lower monthly payment so that they don't think you're just never going to pay them again. That tends to work out, as we say in financial planning, badly. Okay? That's the technical financial planning term. It's kind of a competing goal, but one that you should still give some thought to. And for many of you who might not have debt issues, maybe this becomes your first goal, and that is building up a cash reserve. I know we have all heard, we can probably lull ourselves to sleep by saying we should have about 6 months' worth of expenses in cash savings that we can. We've all heard that over and over. Don't worry about what the target is right now. Just get more. So for many of you, what this means, and I'm making some guesstimates about your ages, or, well, more appropriately, your youth. For many of you, what this means, stop contributing to the 401k for the time being. I love workplace retirement savings plans, but for people who will experience a layoff in 2013, you might end up in a lower tax bracket anyway, where the tax savings of the 401k does you less good than it has done up to now. And unless you're already 59 and a half, you don't want to pay the penalties that it would cost to get that money out of the 401k. And not just the penalty. You've probably heard of that 10% penalty if you're taking money out of the 401k before you reach age 59 and a half. But you also pay ordinary income tax on it. If you're in the 25% tax bracket, maybe you have a spouse who's still working and you stay in the 25% bracket. That's 25% for federal tax, somewhere around 5% for state tax, plus a 10% penalty of the $10,000 you might take out of the 401k because you're short of cash. You would get to spend $6,000. The other $4,000 would get burned up in income taxes. So that's why I say if you're not already or very close to age 59 and a half, when that 10% penalty goes away, you might want to give some thought to stopping your contributions to the 401k temporarily. If you keep your job, you can always restart it, and restart it at a rate that's high enough to compensate for those months when you weren't contributing to the 401k. Your paycheck's going to be smaller, but you'll have extra money in the bank you can use to make up for that smaller paycheck at that higher rate. Of course, everybody's wondering about cutting optional expenses. It's very interesting trying to discover what's an optional expense. There's no universal agreement. In fact, if you want to talk about what you need, there are only 5 things that we need that you can spend your money on. And those are food, shelter, clothing, health care, and whatever you need to keep your income so that you can continue to get food, shelter, clothing, and health care. Everything else is a want. But if we only spent money on our needs, as we're often told to do when people say, I need help figuring out how to spend less money. You know, we Americans don't live by needs alone. And our view of our needs is not the same as what it takes to not die, okay? Even after the stock market downturn in 2008, actually the percentage of people who felt that an iPod was a need, you know, the iPod, when the settlers were taking the Oregon Trail and trying to settle the American West, you know, when they stopped, when they got out of range of a cell tower, you remember, and they couldn't leave without their iPods. You know, 4% of Americans during the recession felt the iPod was a need. But what that really and that was actually up from 3% a few years before. What that really points up is, don't get caught up in this needs versus wants labeling. Just ask yourself, what is it that it costs for me to have this lifestyle that I want? I call that lifestyle overhead. And your lifestyle, if your income is going to drop, your lifestyle may need to change. And it won't likely be changing for the better. If you want to see how you can, I mean, you should start to practice living on less money, and that's that next blank. Practice living on less money and start practicing now. Yeah, it does. I heard somebody say, that sucks.
Because I've done this for the last year and it sucks.
She says she's done it for the last year and it sucks. It doesn't suck as badly as bankruptcy court. I'm reasonably sure that that's true. That is the technical financial planning term for that as well. It sucks. It is not a fun exercise. You may be surprised, though, that the first things you give up won't matter much to you. If you do this right, and I can talk more about this later if you're interested, the first thing to go will be the impulse buy. It's something you didn't even know you wanted before you walked into the store. How important can that really be to your long-term satisfaction? Even if you are one of the people who suffers the layoff, you may discover how little your overall satisfaction is tied to having the things that you're used to having. And it's not a matter often of giving them up. Very often it's a matter of substituting a similar experience. I love my gourmet coffee. I'm not talking about a macchiato. I'm talking about just coffee, well, decaf, which I have them brew extra strong because I really don't want that caffeine buzz. So when I bought it at the coffee house, when I first noticed what it cost at the time, it cost $1.55 for 12 ounces. For the same amount of money, I can brew 7 mugs in my office. It costs just about 20 cents when I do it myself, including the cost of the filter. That's not weird. When you write about these things, you have to include the cost of the filter. But I didn't have to give up my coffee. I substituted a less expensive experience. I didn't have to give up the books and the magazines I used to buy. I just got them free from the public library. The most important step in spending less, the most important step in practicing living on less, is to pay for your life with cash, checks, and online bill pay. What did I leave out? Debit cards and credit cards. Credit cards make it too easy to feel like we're not spending any money. The payment being separated from the acquisition of the product or service, the academic study on this shows that we will, even when we're trying not to spend more using a credit card, we'll spend twice as much using a credit card than we will using cash. So take the credit cards and put them in the sock drawer. Don't cut them up, that's too scary. Just put them in the sock drawer. And do that tonight so that you can practice living on less. If you can, develop a budget. Let's talk about what that looks like. You take a blank sheet of paper and you write down what you spend in every category of your life. Food, the mortgage, clothing, health care, transportation. When you add up those expenses, when clients bring me a list like that, I often say things like, well, I can see where this $24,000 went. What about the other $26,000 you earned last year? Oh, well, I don't know. Well, first of all, you left off taxes, one of your largest bills. Let's add that. Now we're trying to figure out where $12,000 went. $1,000 a month that they didn't know, where it went. And that's very common when you start from zero and just try to imagine your expenses and add them up. But some people can budget very well. About 25% of people are successful budgeting, and about 5% of people enjoy it. This is what I've found in speaking with the audiences that I've talked to. For the other 75% of you, what you should do is, after you have put, boy, that sounded paternalistic, didn't it? What you should do, my professional recommendation is, put the credit cards in the sock drawer and pay yourself first. I sometimes offer my audiences these envelopes that say money I'm keeping for my family or myself. Myself or my family. I have a few of these here. If you would like one, they are free. I have nothing to sell you today, by the way. That's almost true. If you'd like to know more about how to pay yourself first, you can go to economywrap.com and look for the video that's based on my book, Don't Make a Budget, Why It's So Hard to Save Money and What to Do About It. I do have a few of those with me. This is the book. I don't want you to buy it from me. If you insist, I will offer it to you today at a discounted price. But I'd rather have you check this out from the public library. Do you see how this works? A similar experience for less money. I know there are copies at Cleveland Public Library, Lakewood Public Library, and I believe 2 copies at Westlake Porter. So I did not bring many of these, because I don't want to take your money today. I do want you to have the data. There may be some bills in your life that you can negotiate. If you have, for example, a bill from a hospital for medical treatment or from a healthcare provider, my clients and I often find that those can be negotiated. If you'd like to try to pay it off right now, they'll often take some fraction of the total balance and be perfectly content with that. If you're negotiating with creditors about bills that you owe, try to verify with them that they will not be reporting your agreement with them to a credit reporting agency. And by the way, if you are transferring balances to a credit card that costs you less, don't necessarily cancel the other credit cards, particularly if they're venerable cards with, by which I mean you have a long history with them. If you cancel your debt relationships with the longest history, that could adversely affect your credit report. Teresa's the expert on these things and on such matters of what affects the credit score. I hope I'm not making a mistake in suggesting they should ask you about that if they have questions.
They ask me all the time.
Okay. All right. Very good. So I'm not creating any more work for you than you already have. All right. If you decide you want to cut up a credit card, that's fine. Just keep it a secret. You don't have to tell the credit card company. 2 other things I want to cover before we move into questions. If you do separate from service, you will probably have the chance to roll over your 401k. For the 401k, do nothing in haste. There is nothing that you need to rush about rolling over the 401k. And there are many people out there in the financial services world who want you to be fearful so they can sell you something that is going to cost you a lot of money. Maybe not up front, maybe only if you try to get the money out, or maybe hidden in charges that show up or that you don't get to see easily. They're technically revealed to you in a prospectus. How many of you have ever invested in mutual funds in a 401k? Okay, now be honest, leave your hands up if you read the prospectus. 1, 2, 3. I would expect you to. The prospectus is disclosure. We told you about it. You know about these expenses. And it's the same kind of disclosure that you would get in rolling over your 401k. You don't want to be rushed through that. You want to know how much these things will cost. I have yet to see a 401k rolled into an annuity that I was happy with. I've never seen one I was happy with. And a lot of other kinds of investments that could be in an IRA where you'd roll over the 401k can be unnecessarily expensive. So take your time with that. You should do nothing in haste, but something may be coming for you. If you have a loan against your 401k, then if you're separated from service, you'll have a limited amount of time to pay that back, or it will be considered a premature distribution, or it will be considered a distribution. If you're under age 59 and a half, you should expect not only the federal and state tax, but the 10% penalty. There's some exceptions to that penalty. You should assume that they don't apply in your planning. If you find that you're actually going to face, so try to make sure you're not dealing with that unrepaid loan from a 401k. If you find you might have to, then I think it's time to start looking for those exceptions. Similarly, by the way, your credit union, if you have outstanding loans to the credit union here at the Plain Dealer, I am given to understand that they will take repayment of that loan from your severance. I'm not exactly sure how that works. It might just be part of your account agreement with the credit union. But be aware that that's a possibility. And I think, Teresa, you said you're looking into that more thoroughly. Okay. Last thing, things that are not optional, insurances. Maybe not all insurances. I don't think many of us need accidental death and dismemberment insurance. But health insurance is not optional. I had a client once with about $3 million who was without health insurance for a few months, and I could not sleep. I said, Joe, not his real name, you have got to get health insurance. I don't care what it costs, but an uninsured healthcare crisis could ruin you. He says, I have $3 million. It's more than I ever thought I'd have. I said, that doesn't matter. That's half a transplant. I mean, I don't know if it's actually half a transplant, but transplants are costly, and they cost more the less insurance you have. Why is it that these things cost less when you're insured? Does it make sense? Not always, but it is the way it is. And anybody who's facing a layoff has to confront the fact that it's not about what's just or what's right or what's worthy. It's just the way it is. You will need to have health insurance. And the COBRA coverage that you have available here might or might not be, or that you'll have available if you're laid off, might or might not be the least expensive way to get covered. It's tempting to cut other insurances too. I particularly hate to see uninsured motorist insurance get cut. By the way, I don't sell any insurance. I sell no insurance of any kind. I'm not allowed to make any money on the sale of any kind of insurance. But there are certain coverages you need to have, and things like auto liability and uninsured motorist are on that list. If you're paying for disability insurance, if you have your own individual disability policy, which is probably no more than a quarter of you in this room if statistics bear out, you probably want to work to keep that because replacing it is likely to be more expensive now that you are older than you were when you got that policy. There is a lot more time that we have. I don't have a lot more to say in the way of prepared remarks. I hope some of the things we've been talking about are of help to you. I do have something else I don't want you to buy. This is my financial tips book. It's normally $7.95. I have recently been giving them away. And the reason I've been giving them away is that people need the data. I don't know if anybody needs the data more than the 50 or so of you in this room. So I have a copy of my financial tips book for each of you with my compliments. If you don't want to read it, please bring it to me so I can sign it for you, and then it will sell for more on eBay. Okay? So those will be over here at this table, and I will take questions. The question is, when faced with severance, is it better to take it as a lump sum or to spread it out over a period of time? There's no one right answer to that question, unfortunately. It will depend in part on the income tax situation. If the severance, is going to artificially all be squeezed into a single year by taking it as a lump sum, you might want to spread it out. It also may be affected by how unemployment compensation interacts with the severance. I understand that you'll have a representative from unemployment to talk about unemployment compensation here next week. So that will be a good question to ask them as well. Her comment is if you take it as a lump sum rather than stretching it out, you can start getting the unemployment sooner rather than later. And you already know more about the subject than I do. And the person who will be coming in next week to talk about unemployment compensation will be able to further amplify that. That may well be. And it may be enough reason to take the risk that you might have more taxable income in 2013 than you otherwise would have. My thoughts on rolling credit card debt into lower interest loans. Sometimes a very good idea. Since it's all about cash flow, you want to make sure that in the process of doing that you end up with lower payments. That's not always true, but it's true for all of you right now, that what you want to do is make sure you end up with lower payments. Sometimes you can end up with lower payments when that loan that you roll it into is the first mortgage. So I'm sometimes asked the question, as long as I'm refinancing my mortgage, should I take my credit cards and roll that debt in as well? There are a couple of things you need to do before you take that step. And the first one looks like this. Do you understand what I'm telling you? If you are still using the credit cards, do not roll them into your mortgage, because the odds are very high that you will end up with the higher mortgage that you have to pay back and credit cards charged up again. The big problem with credit cards isn't the interest rate, it's the convenience. It's that it doesn't feel viscerally like real spending. In your gut, it doesn't feel like real spending. And it's got to feel like real spending for you to hate to give that dollar away. I remember an ad several years ago for a large discount chain. I only saw it once, which was good because I don't think my blood pressure could have taken it a second time. It showed a young lady enjoying her lawn furniture. Beautiful, soft focus, verdant green backyard like we all wish we had, and this lovely lawn furniture. And it was at the time when the fashion in television commercials was these super close-ups that showed half of your face so you could barely see, you know, that crinkle when she smiles, the crinkle by the eyes. And the voiceover said, "I only went in for chips and salsa." Would she have bought $300 of lawn furniture if she'd gone in for chips and salsa and had to pay in cash because she left her credit cards in the sock drawer? But some percent, this group is large enough that I can predict with some certainty. There's some percentage of you who are sure that you will have the discipline to not charge up those credit cards again, and you will be mistaken. If you're mistaken about that, I'd rather you not experience it. So when you talk about rolling debt into a lower interest loan, don't think so much about lower interest as lower payments. And if we're talking about debt that you can continue to enlarge like credit cards, if you're going to do that, I want to see the credit cards cut up before you do that. You need to be prepared to become a different person if you have not already made that step of not spending money on credit cards if you are carrying a balance. This is not an easy thing. Another question we hear frequently in situations like this, should you focus more on paying down the debt or focus more on building up the cash? That partly depends on how expensive the debt is. The higher the interest rate and the lower the balance. If you have a card with a small balance and a high interest rate, go ahead and get that paid off. You'll love having one less bill every month. If it's something that you can pay off before May 1st without too much difficulty. But when people are not sure how much to apply in either direction, I say 50-50. if you managed through paying yourself first, through leaving the credit cards in the sock drawer, to carve out $100 a pay or $400 a pay, whatever it happens to be, put half of it toward the debt and half of it toward the savings if you're not sure what else to do. Actually, though, in your situation, now that I think of the kind of the imminence of the potential layoff, you might want to skew that 75-25 with only 25% toward the debt. Make sure you don't let any of those debts go into arrears, though, because if your credit score starts to hurt, that affects more than just what you pay for credit. We used to say, you got to be taking out any loans soon? No? Then why do you care about your credit score? Well, it's different now. And the credit score affects things like your auto insurance and the possibility of your getting a new job. So you do want to protect your credit score. So somewhere between 50-50 or 75% towards savings is what I'd suggest. The question about refinancing to a new 30 years, do I suggest that be done before before you'd be laid off? Absolutely, because today you can honestly represent that we've got this much income in the household. That makes you more appealing as a borrower. After the layoff, you've got this much income in the household. That makes you less appealing. And we're not sure whether the lenders will be savvy enough to understand that they should be a little extra cautious about somebody whose paycheck says the plain dealer. That they should, because imagine that you're the mortgage lender and somebody comes into your office and it's one of your colleagues from the newsroom. You would probably think, I wonder how much longer they're going to have that income. If they need every scrap of income to support this loan, maybe we want to ask some more questions to see how much savings they have. This is true for any place where there'd be a layoff, but I'm not so sure that the lending world is, I'm not sure they're quite that sharp on this particular detail. But the best time to try to pursue that refinance is probably back before the layoffs were announced. But it's not too late now, and I would encourage you, if we're going to burn up all of your lunch hour in here today, maybe take some of your lunch hour tomorrow and call around. Start with your existing mortgage lender as well. And I don't think you need to mention an impending layoff unless they happen to bring it up. If they happen to bring it up, absolutely you want to be truthful, because you're going to sign mortgage documents that state that what you're telling them about your income, your assets, your liabilities, your expenses, that those are all true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury. Now, if you are in prison, you'll get 3 meals and a place to sleep. So from that perspective, you don't need to worry about the job, but the travel benefits are terrible. So the question is, are any of the online tools particularly better for tracking expenses or for managing a budget? Is it better than pen and paper? Whichever one you will actually use is the one that's better. So some of you will do better with pencil and paper, some of you will do better online. The one that will cost you the least is also better. I would not pay for any computer program, for instance, that purports to help you with budgeting, because you can get the information free. Be careful of sponsored sites, though. There is one site that entices people in to their site by saying, we can show you your credit score for free. And then once you're there, they say, we can also evaluate a variety of other things about your finances. And they're a lender. And isn't it interesting how the answer to every problem that they can identify you is a new loan? When the only tool in your toolkit is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And a lot of the financial services industry works that way. The answer to saving more money is not to buy a new whole life insurance policy, for example. But you will find people who want to make that the answer for you. One of my colleagues who works very much the way I do says, when people ask what he does for a living, he says, I protect people from the financial services industry. And I wish I could say that my job was different, but it's not. So you have to be careful, look for hidden agendas on those sites. Last time I looked at Cleveland Public Library, under the heading of budgets, personal, and its subheadings, there were 97 different titles that Cleveland Public Library offered. So no matter whether you prefer to work online or to read a traditional bound book, there's plenty of data available for you. The questions, if you already have a shorter term mortgage and you're applying for a 30-year fix, does that send up a red flag? Not particularly. If they say, boy, why would you want to do this? You can say, I like a lower payment. I thought I would like having it paid off faster, but I discovered I really like a lower payment. For closing costs on the mortgage, can you write them off on your taxes? The short answer is typically no. You can write off interest, and you can write off prepaid interest or points, but I'd rather see no points, and the interest on the closing costs ends up as just part of your normal payment. But the closing costs themselves, the only part of those that I've seen able to be written off other than interest is property tax. So am I missing anything, Teresa?
Just discount points if you buy down the rate.
Yeah, points if you buy down the rate, interest and property tax. And points are just a prepaid interest. Oh, and PMI, that's true. That's true. Private mortgage insurance, you can write off at least for the moment. I want to say that the deal to avert the fiscal cliff continues that through 2013, but I don't believe it continues it beyond that. I really don't know, since they just wrote the tax law less than 2 weeks ago. Last year's tax law. The question is, if there's an unpaid auto loan, would I recommend taking a portion of the severance to pay it off, or would I recommend paying it off on the regular schedule? The answer to that depends mostly on things like what's the interest rate, and do you feel you can afford to keep making the payments? If you think that after a layoff you'll have difficulty making the payments and that it makes more sense to take it out of cash flow while you're working, you might want to try to pay that off if it's nearly paid off. If it's at a low interest rate, and if the dollar amount is low enough that you can manage to continue the payments with the help of your severance pay perhaps, or with unemployment compensation after the layoff, I don't see any harm in stacking up more cash and just paying that off on its regular schedule. Not particularly anything about it being a car loan that I find makes it any different, except that if you end up a couple months behind, you'll find an empty driveway one day. So and also, that also, in the technical financial planning parlance, stinks. So. Yeah.
Before you move on to another question, which we have the room until 3. Obviously, people are welcome to stay as long as possible. Ken's agreed to stay for a couple of hours to talk to people one-on-one. And no, I'm not trying to hurry anybody into breaking this up, but I do know some people only have an hour for lunch. So 2 things real quick. One, Ken will follow up with people, even he'll be here for a couple hours. He'll follow up with, if you have a question about something that was talked about here, you have his contact information, and he has agreed to answer questions and help people with small things. Just please don't take advantage of that and say, hey, by the way, Ken, here's my budget, here's my bills, here's my, can you sit down with me for a couple of hours and take care of this? That's not what this is about, although there are a lot of folks, I'm sure, in the months ahead that will be asking for financial planners' recommendations. Ken is on my short list of people. He's not the only one. Karen's another one, Scott's another one, but a lot of good people. So if you need long-term stuff, then he can help you out, but there'll be a price tag attached to that. Short term, he'll help you with whatever you need. And beyond that, we just have a couple token thank yous. We have a plain dealer mug. These also will end up on eBay very soon.
Yeah. Will you sign it for me?
Somebody will.
Yeah.
And then we have one of these awesome Save the Plain Dealer t-shirts.
Oh, good.
Which, for those who haven't seen it, and John donated this. And then we also have a very small gift card to Amazon, so that you don't have to go to the public library for everything.
Yeah, thank you.
So there are those. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you. Yeah. The question is regarding the 401k, the investments in your plan, which I'm not familiar with. It sounds like you've done the research and found these are separately managed accounts, not retail shares of mutual funds. So it's harder to know exactly what they hold. It's harder to know exactly what the current value is. It shouldn't be terribly difficult to find out what they cost. And the I think your question is it a good idea to move it out of that sooner rather than later? Part of it depends on, I think most of it depends on what do those separately managed accounts cost? What's the expense ratio in those accounts? As an investor, I'm a big believer in indexing. When you begin to understand how little you can control about the stock market and how little anybody can control about it, it's a few short steps toward being an indexer. And there are readily available index mutual funds, even for international funds, that cost less than 0.25%. If your investment options are costing less, that's one good reason to think about moving them. On the other hand, a reason you might want to stay, sometimes the 401k program's cash option has a rate of return that you can't touch anywhere in the retail market. I know for state employees, for example, who have a Section 457 plan that's very popular, their version of a 401k, they're still getting 2.5% on cash. Her comment is that the costs in the cash option can actually be higher than the costs in some of the equity options. And there are reasons for that I could go into, but the short answer then, it sounds like you've done the research on the expenses. The short answer to your question is that if the expenses are higher than you'd pay outside, then I think it's worth moving it probably pretty soon. But with the 401k, do nothing in haste. Give yourself plenty of time to evaluate and understand what you're going into. You can get an IRA at a discount brokerage with virtually no annual fees. I don't have any connection with any brokerage. I could recommend, well, the ones that I would suggest you look into would probably be Schwab, if you want to see local offices, Vanguard, if you don't care about having a local office, and probably take a look at Scottrade and Fidelity, just to mention two others out of really a largish universe of discount brokers, two others that have local offices, in case you want that convenience. You'd open an IRA there. The money would typically go straight from the 401k into the IRA without you ever seeing it. There's no tax effect that way. Typically, it will go over as dollars, and then it would be up to you to decide how to invest that.
Now, if I don't go over the maximum amount allowed per person for that year and my age, how many IRAs can I have?
The question is, how many IRAs can you have as long as you're not going over the maximum annual contribution? Right. You can have as many different accounts as you want. So you could have an IRA at Dodge & Cox, and one at Fidelity Funds, and one at Vanguard, and one at, the next fund company that comes to mind is one I don't like, so I'm not going to mention it. Say Domini Funds, for, let's choose something that's a socially conscious fund. But you can probably find a single discount broker where you can get the Dodge & Cox fund and the Vanguard fund and the Fidelity fund, and keep them all in one wrapper if you care to. It's just less to manage. The process of moving things from the 401k to the IRA is usually very smooth, and occasionally it's not. And I'd rather you not have to keep track of too many plates spinning at the same time. So if you're in a retirement plan option that where they said just choose this one and it will kind of track your life and get less and less risky the closer and closer you are to retirement, there are traditional mutual funds that you can buy in an IRA that will do very similar things. So it doesn't have to get much more complicated just by virtue of the fact that you would no longer be in the 401k plan.
That's what most people got pushed into when they did the changeover, was the target fund.
The target funds are what most people got pushed into.
If they didn't make an election.
If they didn't make an election. I'm a big believer in keeping the control for my clients in individual funds. I want to know how much they have in large companies and how much is in small, and I want them to be able to choose how much goes between, but people pay me for that, and sometimes they pay me a lot of money for that guidance tailored to them, and sometimes it makes a lot more sense to say, this fits pretty well. You know, what I'm wearing right now is off the rack. You know, it fits pretty well. I don't need to pay $1,000 more for a tailored suit, and I bought this on sale. Because when you write books about this stuff, you have to watch the sales. In the same way, those pre-mixed funds can sometimes fit pretty well. They're not all created equal, but it's probably better than just saying, I have no idea how to do this, let me pick a fund that did well last year. That's usually a recipe for disaster, to just pick something that did well recently. Other questions that we want to ask in the group setting? I will be staying around for quite a while to talk to people one-on-one. Okay, thanks very much for having me. I'm here for quite a while.